Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland. I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Gabby Martin, and we're here entering the 4th of July weekend after what arguably is one of ever of Loki out of
I'd say
four.
Marvel television, like in general.
Just outstanding TV and storytelling. Super fun. And since Gabby made a comment about the East Coast being the West Coast, best coast, I'm here in sunny California, leading the global economy in my aunt and uncle's backyard. So
I guess that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I will say though that East Coast is the best coast. The one thing we have over you, I love the West Coast. You guys are great, but what did it for me was the fact that you can't smell the ocean there. Couldn't do it. Got to go back to the East Coast. So,
what part of the West Coast have you been to?
Sorry, San Francisco.
That's it? I mean, that can have
my knowledge of the West Coast is very limited, but I still think East Coast is Florida to Connecticut, still the best coast.
When we have San Diego Comic-Con in person, we're going to cure that deficiency in your life. Yeah, that's just, there are wonderful beaches out east. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, I will say for Connecticut, the fight I'm still struggling with is we consider the Sound a beach. And as a Floridian, it's not a beach. If it's not against an ocean, not a beach. I'm sorry. Sorry to my fellow Connecticut residents, but it's not a beach.
We can have wonderful discussions about the Great Lakes, Lake Tahoe, Lake Powell, because there is beachfront property there, but it's freshwater.
Lakefront property, because it's in front of a lake.
Those of us who have property there feel differently about that. But again, we can share the experience.
I have opinions on beaches, guys. Your opinions on beaches.
God, what's going to happen if we discuss pizza? Like, that could get ugly fast. So I do say New York pizza is pretty outstanding.
Don't say that to anybody from Connecticut, because we tried to make pizza our state food. I don't get it, but I am told that Connecticut is the best pizza, and it has been voted Pepe's is the world's best pizza. So just putting that out there.
I don't think I've experienced that. Again, we can go on tour and figure that out. That said, let's talk about the Nexus event. And this has a ton of legal issues. It was like a piñata of just, oh my God, or gods, what's going on here. So it opens up with a flashback of Sylvie as, the young Loki goddess of mischief, playing with her toys, definitely having the hero perspective, and she's arrested by the TVA. From a Fourth Amendment perspective, they seem pretty on point with the why we're arresting you, except it's a kid, like a 7-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
There are problems with that, especially when daddy's a god. Like, those are big issues. We both have notes on this.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, what are your initial thoughts?
I mean, it's not, we should say, let's say I know probably if you did the math from what Sylvie was saying of how long she's been on the run, you could kind of get a guesstimate of how old she was then. But let's say she was like 6 or 8 is how young the actress looks. Maybe 10 at the most. That's not unheard of. We have juveniles who are arrested at that age. I'd say probably what would be unheard of is maybe 3, maybe 2. That would be a little questionable. But a child, we've had children, at a very young age put on trial for murder, whether it's accidental homicide of the accidental firing of a gun or intentional. There are some sociopathic children who have committed kind of heinous crimes who have been arrested and charged for them. And of course, we kind of separate teenagers, but teenagers are also children. They're also considered juveniles. And that's, again, not unheard of. I mean, to drugs, assault, robbery, any number of things can be arrested. It's a different set of laws. Juvenile crime is its own kind of similar laws, but I would say the sentencing is different. But there's some similarities that they do have to be Mirandized, just like adults. When juveniles are arrested, they're entitled to, by law, to have their Miranda rights read to them. And you could kind of consider them saying that they were arresting her for being a variant, but they don't say why she's a variant. Because remember, she asks Ravonna later in the episode, what was her Nexus event? And Ravonna says she doesn't remember. So the problem, though, with Mirandizing children, especially young children, is the fact of most research shows that children waive their Miranda rights because they don't understand them. I'm sure a lot of adults don't understand what their Miranda rights are either. But you see that a lot of children not understanding, and waiving these very critical rights away, and kind of putting them in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad there. And there was a recent Supreme Court opinion where Brett Kavanaugh delivered the opinion of the court about, like sentencing young people. And like for him to like have a heavy hand about the young people getting punished is not well taken. Now, we have different state laws that get into arresting children. In California, it's California Welfare and Institution Code 663. And, the elements that are outlined are, it appears to the court that the conduct and behavior of the minor may endanger the health, person, welfare, or property of himself or herself or others, and that the circumstances of their home environment may endanger the health, person, welfare, or property of another minor. It appears to the court that either personal service upon the minor has been unsuccessful or the whereabouts of the minor are unknown. On the great state of Texas, because, if we want to get heavy-handed, Texas is a great example. They also have the procedures for arresting children. And it's done by a law enforcement officer, and that can include a district peace officer, and there has to be probable cause that a child engaged in conduct that violates a penal law of Texas or any political subdivision of the state, delinquent conduct, or conduct indicating a need for supervision. And it goes on and on and on, because, hey, what we need are laws with teeth to punish children so they live in fear. And that's what some states do. So, yeah.
And then there's some states that have, their juvenile laws are focused more on reform and rehabilitation. You see that here in Connecticut, that, we have laws focused more on rehabilitating children that cause crimes for any number of reasons, especially circumstances we see with young people where they grow up, what they're pressured into. So we see that, here, and we have laws in our state that are more focused on rehabilitating juveniles. So it just depends on the state and how they treat juveniles. But they are treated, most important, they are treated completely differently from adults, except for the fact that they are both Mirandized.
And with that, if we're going to arrest children, that means there has to be a trial. And there are rules for trials. And one of the big ones is the child has to be legally competent to stand trial, which means, can they talk to their attorney so they can understand the charges against them and assist in their own defense? Sylvie doesn't have that luxury. She has someone who's game on to execute her.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's explaining to the kid, this is why you're here, why you were taken from your parents. And on that note, parents have a right to know what the hell's going on. So again, thinking of the All Father and All Mother, like that's the sort of thing they would wage war over. So we've also,
we don't know who Sylvie's parents are because she does exist in a different timeline. And I saw speculation the other day that in Sylvie's timeline, there's no Frigga, and Odin, continues his battles, and the person that's beside him in these battles is Hela. And I think I mentioned this in our other podcast. And Odin perishes, and Hela is the one that fights on Jotunheim and takes Sylvie / female Loki as her prize and raises Lady Loki / Sylvie as her daughter. Whether or not when she perishes, how she perishes, whatever. And maybe I can see Hela not caring as much if her kid got arrested. She may not be aware. She's like, oops, I just lost another soldier. Oh, well.
It also highlights that the reset charge could be universal in nature. It's not just like a 20-foot different distance. It could be the entire universe is reset, for that individual that's just been removed from that timeline. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack. Whether or not Sylvie's as a Loki is biologically like the child of the same frost giants. Because that could be important later for one of the other discussions that we have. Is Lady Loki in this case actually Loki, as opposed to another child who was given the name? So there's differences there.
But I do think she's the daughter of the same frost giant, because we know Loki is Loki Laufey's son, and her paperwork named her as I don't know if it said Loki or Sylvie, but Loki / Sylvie Laufey Daughter, which is, son of Loki, or son of Laufey versus son or daughter of Laufey. So I think that is the same. I think the other circumstances are still up in the air, which I hope they reveal them. I hope they don't leave that, unspoken.
It also raises an issue, how old is she, since they age slower. So she could have been 7 and she could now be 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know. Or she could be 35. Like, we don't know. So that's a weird twist. For we knew it took years, but how many years? Are we talking a century? Couple? Because she got a lot of the reset charges and the other TVA equipment.
Yeah. I mean, she seemed to be moving pretty quickly, but I don't know if she could get them all that quickly. I don't know how quickly that plan was formulated. Because remember, she says the first part of, her life was spent kind of escaping the TVA and figuring out, it took her some time to figure out that she could escape into these apocalypses and live out her life. And she does say that she's seen the death of 1,000 universes. So maybe she is the same age as Loki, our canon Loki, but that remains to be seen.
She has to be around 1,500 years old as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, unless they age super slowly in childhood. So when Thor looked like he was 10, he was really 150. So,
who knows?
That could be a thing.
Yeah.
We don't know. And you know what? We don't have to have an answer for everything. It is possible.
Despite what they say on the internet.
So there's an important thing to talk about, and that's executing children, because that's what they apparently were going to do with resetting her.
Or do they?
Yeah, there are all kinds of curveballs, but it looked like they were going to execute her. And executions of minors, there has to be evidence that they participated in something constitutionally, like that they were active participants in the crime that took place. Because killing a kid is disproportionate and constitutionally intolerable, at least in California. And there are other states that have no problems killing a child.
And I think first we have to establish that this would only apply in states that have the death penalty. So there are states that do not have the death penalty and don't have it across the board. Then I believe there's also states that only apply to adults, that they've already abolished the death penalty for juveniles. So then in the small states, and I think this would be a case where it would have to be, again, going back to that idea that, we're kind of using the term child and juvenile interchangeably, but juvenile is anybody under the age of 18 that's not a legal adult. Sorry, I have a guest here who wants to walk over my keyboard. You can see the end of his little tail there. So this would be, more so for children. Sorry. For children that are older, that would be closer to that line of adults. He just wants to be the center of attention.
Yeah, that's why I let my aunt and uncle's dogs out, and one goes by. That's why I had to get up and run to let them out. One of the other tests that we have from the U.S. Supreme Court is that when a state permits the execution of a minor, great care must be taken to ensure that the minor truly deserves to be treated as an adult. A specific inquiry, including the age, actual maturity, family environment, education, emotional and mental stability, and prior record, is particularly relevant when a minor's criminal culpability is at issue. And that's from Berger v. Kemp, 483 U.S. 776 at 824. So, yeah, you can have the devil child that murders their class. I mean, sure, there are the horrible things that can happen, but at least in California in the 1990s, we had a Get Tough on Crime march with all the initiatives that we had, and so we had all of these crime enhancement public votes that took place, and that either added a L for life or D for death penalty, and no one running for office wanted to look soft on crime. So we ended up with some pretty harsh rules, and there was movements to try to take away judicial discretion and give it to the prosecutor instead. I mean, just truly retribution. And with the Newsom administration, like, he enacted a moratorium on executions, and that moratorium was, literally pulling the equipment out of San Quentin. So, we're not doing it right now, and I'm okay with that. I prefer. I mean, if we're going to execute someone, it should be for truly heinous crimes. And that when you see it, it's extreme. Mm-hmm. But it's don't make people martyrs. And then that gets into the issue of prison reform, because we spend more in prisons and have less focus on education. So, but in Sylvie's case, it was simply off the kid. And there's a lot of just so wrong. And that's the first 2 minutes of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've noticed a big issue with judicial ethics. Can you walk us through what you identified?
So we know, this flashback, obviously we see that Ravona is the one that arrests young Sylvie. And she's the one that brings her in, and she's the one who would ultimately be responsible for Sylvie escaping, because it's her tempad that she steals and escapes with. And so my question was, we know Ravonna is a judge, so however long Sylvie's been on the run, she somehow got promoted to judge, in that she went from a Minuteman to a judge in that time frame. And that's kind of questionable, because if you think about it, the Minutemen, they're kind of quasi U.S. Marshals, quasi prosecutors, because there is really no other, prosecuting party with the TVA. So obviously we've seen, prosecutors become judges all the time. But it's questionable whether this would be something that would disqualify her from becoming a judge. Although, as we've seen, judicial appointment qualifications really slid in recent years. Obviously, to back up a little bit, there's several ways you can become a judge. You can obviously be appointed at the state level. You can be appointed at the federal level. So that would be by the president. At the state level would be by the governor. And then in some states, you have to run for election for judges. So that's not the case here in Connecticut. That's the case in Florida. Circuit court judges run for election. So it would just be a matter of whether that did not sway the voters in your favor. If you had this case that somebody used against you and said, hey, well, you screwed up this case, like, you really shouldn't be a judge. So that's a little iffy, although, again, to go back to judicial qualification standards kind of slipping, we saw during the Trump administration, obviously, Brett Kavanaugh, who's a kind of example in of himself, but there's also example of federal judge appointments where there was an individual who didn't know what the Dalbert test was, which is basic law school evidentiary standards. And you would hope that somebody who is a transactional attorney, which that was his excuse, would at least brush up on their basic bar prep stuff before sitting before a congressional hearing to become a judge. But who knows? Maybe she has the favor of the man behind the curtain. Maybe that's how Ravonna became a judge.
There could be that. And it's not uncommon for DAs to end up as judges. Granted, there are jokes about that judge is just a DA in a robe, and that's always concerning. She's also a hands-on judge, so like that's a thing as well. So their system is very different, even though there are similarities that we can recognize enough to go like, wait a minute, like that just offends our sense of due process.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, you kidnapped a child to execute them for all that. Yeah, it's like there's without the parents, and we just reset the universe because we declare that this is the right way for things to be going. Super messed up. So, because if there had to be a prior Nexus event, like Odin dying, that they're not touching. So, yeah, it's like, why can't the multiverse coexist?
And I think the other issue, whether or not she has the favor of the man behind the curtain that allows her to get her status elevated, and again, like you said, there's kind of differences between their system and our system. But I think the big issue, and hopefully, I know, everybody's ethics kind of got troubled, hopefully, when you saw that she's still overseeing the case that she screwed up in the first place. That would never, ever happen. If you are a judge, you are supposed to, it's in the model rules, it's called Model Rule 211, disqualification. And it lays out the reasons why a judge shall disqualify themselves from any proceeding in which a judge's impartiality might be reasonably questioned. So a judge can either disqualify themselves or recuse themselves sua sponte, which means on their own volition, or a party can request that a judge be disqualified from a case. And guess what the first example is? That the judge has a personal bias or prejudice or personal knowledge of the facts. Ravona has all three in this case. So she is definitely a candidate for disqualification. And the fact that she has been overseeing the recapture of the Loki variant as a judge, I can see as a Minuteman, it would still be theoretically her case. But when she became a judge and when she became this kind of impartial source, she should have stepped away.
So, Your Honor, the child bit you, correct? Okay. Do you have teeth marks still? Yeah, that's just bad mojo on so many levels. Yeah.
And I think it's clear that Ravona has a personal vendetta against, whether you kind of buy into the theories that whoever is the man behind the curtain is personally, their mission is to just prune all the Loki's variants. It's clear that she has an issue with her because she was the one who escaped. So that's not great.
No. And hello to the War of the Stars, Star Wars podcast for hanging out with us this evening. We will be talking Bad Batch tomorrow, so stay tuned. It's just so much bad in such a short span of time in this episode. But let's get to the issue that I raised last week, not to the degree you did, but that's can two Lokis get married? And before people saying love wins or it was okay in olden times for siblings to get married, I just got to say no. There's a friend who speaks at cons as well, and this individual is really educated and has a professional degree, and she was defending that that conduct in Game of Thrones, saying like, oh, it was just different for them. And my reaction is, do you feel that way about slavery?
I shouldn't laugh, but that's good. Yeah, I know what's funny to me is the same people that are like, oh, it's just a fictional show, like are the same people that like object to Ariel being a Black woman, like, but she's a fictional, like, mythical character, like she's a fictional character. Okay. But yeah, I'm sorry to whatever NSA agent is reviewing my search history because it looks a little questionable right now. But I did, for the good people who watch and listen to our podcast, I looked into whether, actually what I looked into is what type of marriages are illegal. That's what I started with. And so, so there's a lot of there's several circumstances that can create an illegal marriage, which would automatically result in a void marriage. So bigamy, which is married to more than one person, incest, that's our case now, underage spouse, and mental incapacitation. But the incest, automatically, if you find out you're related, you accidentally married your, half sibling or whatever, your marriage is automatically illegal. And the way it works is kind of interesting because if you get married under circumstances which would render the union illegal, the marriage is treated void, not from the time you discovered it was illegal, but from the time the marriage started. Unless it's so that's, it kind of goes backwards in time. Besides incest, so that's kind of the very initial, siblings, parents, children, etc. Many states allow for first cousin marriages, which that I think is more in that historical context. That's where we've seen, you know, a lot of royal
family.
families.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of royal families, you know, upper class. That's what happened because they married relations to keep the blood pure. And that's all we'll say on that. But many states actually allow for first cousin marriages with the caveat that there be no offspring from the marriage. So either you have to kind of swear that you're not going to have any children, you have to do genetic testing, or you have to be, you know, infertile for some reason, but no offspring can come of that marriage. Some states allow cousin marriages in you know, special circumstances, adoptive cousins, half cousins, cousins twice removed, that kind of thing. You know, the farther out you get on the family tree, the more kind of okay it is in legal world. So it just depends on the state. I was surprised at the amount of states that first cousins are allowed to marry.
Were they Southern?
No, it's kind of all over the place. So it's actually called first cousin marriages. If you want to mess with your search history like mine, feel free to Google it. And there's a whole list of, you know, what special circumstances, what's required, all that kind of stuff. But I think there's two parts here, because I think the question really is, to the question of can they legally get married, is what do we consider Sylvie in relation to our Loki? Is he a relation? You know, is she kind of like his identical twin? You know, a clone? You know, or the other thing that I was thinking is that, you know, she could be considered a non-citizen of that timeline, of his timeline that she's in. So if she's considered a non-citizen of his timeline, and she's not considered his relation, just she's coming from another timeline, she's in his timeline now, they can totally get married regardless of her immigration status in that timeline.
Yeah, I think there's too much DNA that's similar, that this is the equivalent of siblings at that point, and that's just wrong on so many levels. Yeah, I'm gonna go with no. And
I think I will say though, and this may get me, you know, hate online, but you know, whatever. Is I've seen a lot of people say that, you know, it is very in character for Loki's first love interest, because we've never seen him have a love interest prior to this. That his first love interest is himself, for lack of a better word. So it's just that, you know, the selfish kind of nature of his character. Not saying it's right or correct. I'm just saying narratively, it makes sense for the character.
So I want to address that. I actually think Sif might have been a love interest, which is why he cut her hair, because he didn't know how to flirt with her in a way that would not result in bodily injury. And so that's issue one. Issue two, it's the, wow, someone I can finally identify with who likes similar things to me. Okay, you shouldn't have to go to a family reunion to find that.
Yeah.
There's, you know, like not everyone's a Roosevelt. So there's definite better ways to do that. And that's why there was a giant branch forming. So that the
Although I think this is kind of going on a tangent, but I think it could also be interpreted as, and this was how I initially saw it until the scene in the with Timekeepers was, you know, two Lokis aligning. Because remember, up until that moment, up until, you know, Sylvie shares her past, they were not on a team. They were not colleagues. Their interests were not aligned. And their interests suddenly aligned, and that they wanted to protect each other, and they wanted to they formed a bond, however you want to see that bond, as a romantic bond, as a platonic, whatever, that they were considering somebody other than themselves. So I think that Lokis are not supposed to do that.
I would add to that that it's our Loki learning compassion and empathy for the first time, because he sees void of that in prior actions that we've seen him in. So I think that was also in play as well, because at the end we get him saying, I'm not good at this, or this is new for me. It's like empathy.
Yeah.
Trying to be a decent person is radically new to Loki.
Yeah, and I think you see that too with how he interacts with Mobius, that he's concerned about Mobius, and he that's why I think he kind of yells frustratedly at the end that they're lying to you, and then he looks genuinely like distressed and upset when Mobius is pruned. Like, that's not, I don't think Loki would, as we've seen him before, would be necessarily that distressed by somebody he's only had a few interactions with.
He made a friend, and he was very upset that this person who gave him a chance just got killed in front of him. So at least we think. And when that happened, I went, so it's no holds barred at this point. Okay, like anything goes.
Alona better watch her back.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, bad lady. Okay, so we now know that the TVA recruiting strategy is not just creating people, it's getting variants, wiping their minds, and if they remember who they are, they kill them. We don't know how C20 went out, if she was pruned, and thus could be in some intergalactic dumping ground, or died. So there's, because somebody knowing the truth is not okay, because she can tell others. And they didn't know about, was it C16 getting enchanted, and thus her memories coming back. Mm-hmm. So, all right, so let's talk about mind wiping for employment purposes. You really dug into this, so take it away.
Yes. So this was fun for me because I did some employment stuff both in law school and afterwards, more in the healthcare sector. But it's kind of this weird thing what employers can require, both for qualifications for a job, when you're kind of being onboarded, and when you're actually an employee. And again, usually what it boils down to is they must have a sound work-related reason to require an employee to submit to a certain testing. However, that's also balanced against the employee's rights. So if a test is deemed too personal, too intrusive, too burdensome, it might be considered unlawful by a court. And unfortunately, because these are such kind of broad strokes measurements, there's no hard and fast rules. There's no, this is good, this isn't good kind of threshold. So courts look at this on a case-by-case basis, looking at all the facts, looking at all the circumstances. Another really red flag that will always pop up is if they're applying it discriminatorily. So if it's impacting a protected group, whether that's sex, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, any number of those things can cause discrimination or disability as well. That would be violation of the ADA. So once you're on the job, an employer may require you to submit to a so-called fitness for duty examination. You see this with police officers have to undergo routine kind of physical training, routine physical testing, etc. If you have an injury and you have to come back, they may require testing to determine that you're fit for duty. The other example where we see this a lot is FMLA, paid family medical, or call it paid family medical leave, because that's what we have here in Connecticut, but family medical leave. If you're submitting, whether it's pregnancy or some, other kind of medical reason that you have to take leave, they will require documentation from your doctor to prove that you're not just kind of skipping out on the job. But again, this is kind of it's a balancing test, right? It's like, what is the reason that the employer is doing this? How is the employee affected? And is it being done for all employees? Or is a single employee or a group of employees being singled out? The other thing we usually don't see a lot is psychological examinations. Those are usually considered way too invasive and way too controversial, depending on circumstances. Again, it just depends on the job. Like police officers, you'll see that more in that context as opposed to, like, I don't want to say the word pencil pushers, but like, an office job 9 to 5, you're not going to see that. So it really depends on the job, and it really depends on the circumstances. But it would seem that wiping people's complete memory, not going to be found okay by any court.
So the kidnapping factor, that if they knew who they were, they would not be happy. They did not willingly join the team.
Yeah, and this is almost like false imprisonment, unlawful detention. You see that there's no choice. The scene with, I think it's B. Oh my God, I can't remember her name, but when Sylvie gives her memories back, she says, "I looked happy," and she's visibly distressed that she was removed from this life she had, and now is forcibly. This could be almost considered forced labor, a matter of kind of human trafficking. It's kind of the lesser talked about element of human trafficking, but labor trafficking is a thing of coercing people to work for you, and have it kind of holding something over their head to force them to work for you for little or no money.
It's clearly slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there's no question about it. It's slavery. They did not join the team. They were taken, their memories erased, and then they're reprogrammed to do something else. That's so wrong on so many levels. Even if you need someone protecting the timeline so everything doesn't go to hell, you recruit for that. And I don't know how much of this is going to get worked into either Doctor Strange or Ant-Man, because either could happen, or they could both be connected, as well. So there's that factor of what we're dealing with story-wise, of especially with the setting sun. This can play out in the movies in very interesting ways if they want to. And with the way Marvel has done a pretty good job of connecting things, it's going to connect to at least one of those movies in some way. So stay tuned. Now that does get to the issue of who are the timekeepers, because the first time let's save that. We still have another big issue to talk about, and that's the holding cell Loki is put in. And I think Mobius puts him in there to take him off the field more for his safety, even though it could be viewed as full-on torture to keep reliving a moment over and over again. You did some great analysis on this.
Yeah, I mean, so when he gets put in the time cell, Mobius tells him it's to cool off, right? To cool his heels or whatever he says to Renslayer. But again, you can see that Loki is being pain is being inflicted upon him in this memory. And again, this goes to the question of what are other people's memories? Like, this is obviously the kind of worst and most painful memory that a person has. Loki just happens to be getting physically abused in his. And what I thought was interesting, somebody pointed out that you can hear the sound of each of Lady Sif's punches and attacks get louder and louder and louder, reflecting the increase in pain that he's feeling, which I thought was an interesting point. But it could be considered cruel and unusual punishment, which is prohibited in the United States under the 8th Amendment. And the Supreme Court has held before that unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. I can kind of see that there's a way for them to have somebody relive their worst memory, but not get physically hit in the memory. I'm thinking very much the way Agatha took Wanda through her memory. She was kind of a sideline, as opposed to, in the memory, getting kind of hit, by the bomb and, different attacks and stuff. So I think it would have been much better if they had developed something where, the person in the time cell was kind of an observer as opposed to a participant. There was the standard was refined in Whitley versus Albers, another Supreme Court case in which they stated that the action may seem unconstitutional and may seem unnecessary, like an unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain. It may be actually constitutional if the infliction of pain is done in a good faith effort to restore discipline rather than maliciously to cause harm. I would guess that the timekeepers, defense would be that this was a form of discipline and a form of, cooling somebody's heels, solitary confinement or other kind of incarceration tactics that are used to kind of quote unquote cool people's heels after they've done something to warrant that additional punishment or not warrant it, depending on the case. But I think, given all we know about the timekeepers, I think everything about the timekeepers has been done to maliciously cause harm, and the time cell is one of them. So I don't know if Mobius would be actually, kind of considered the deliverer of the cruel and unusual punishment. I think this is larger the TVA institution. You would really, you would sue a correctional facility or a kind of larger organization.
And it is, as soon as the scene happened, I thought, we've seen Lady Sif on TV more than the movies. So,
yep.
I find that hysterical. So, first 2 Thor movies, bunch of agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or, well, 2 or 3 agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and now this. So, and this was the first time we've seen her in years as well. So, we'll see how she appears in Love and Thunder, and what they do to explain just where were you. So the other issue that you raised is who is to judge who is a variant. That goes to the nature of how was the TVA created, what happened in the multiverse war, and this goes to the issue of the timekeepers. Did they go to different levels? Because when the judge goes to see the timekeepers, that's on a different floor with Mobius waiting outside. The second time they take an elevator down. Was that the same place or not? Did you factually notice that?
I didn't notice. I think one of the things I've appreciated, and I've said, a lot about the kind of filmmaking techniques of, the producers and such on the Loki show, the show Loki, is their use of film as a kind of storytelling tool. And I didn't notice this, but somebody on the wise internet notice that in the scene where they're in the time theater, you can see the shadows of light moving one way and another, and it's used to kind of show Mobius in light when he's told the truth by Loki, and then the light fades on him when he kind of turns away from that truth, and then when he comes back out again, the lights dim, of him kind of rejecting Loki once again. So somebody indicated that because of that motion as well, they may be in one of those spires that we see spinning in the TVA in the center. So it's unclear. It seemed from some of the shots of the library that maybe the library is kind of the levels and they're interspersed in different areas. But I think one of the things that's also cool is they use a lot of the same sets. So when you see them walking, they're coming back into the same set, which kind of gives you that sense of being thrown off. But also that, the kind of routine, very, office spacey looking kind of set of the TVA, that everything kind of looks the same. So I think it's some very strategic filmmaking there.
Okay. As soon as the judge went in to talk to the timekeepers the first time around, my reaction was, this is Wizard of Oz. And we get that.
You were right. I mean, full on Wizard of Oz. It was very, I really, really loved how they did that. And if you didn't get Oz reference, shame on you. You can't be trusted.
I'm sure. I know I wasn't the only person going like, this is fake, and we don't know who's really in charge of this. If it's Kang, if it's the judge, we don't know what's happening, because why do they have a cover story?
Yeah, and what was funny to me is the first one that they focus on, the center timekeeper, looks, he looks kind of spacey and whatever, but when they focus on the frickin' Muppet, that was some like Muppet Disney animatronics, like Chuck E. Cheese level. I was like, this guy's fake. There's no way somebody's rocking that mustache for real.
So there's a lot to unpack. We also learn in this episode that in the Marvel Universe, vampires are real. So that was tossed out.
We're getting Blade.
Yeah. So nice little tease there.
That's coming 2022, 2023?
I lost count, and with COVID, I have no idea how that impacted things. So I'm just happy to get it. There was a great Doctor Strange run with like the ultimate war with the vampires and ending vampirism on Earth, and it was an epic showdown that involved everyone from Dracula to the first vampire, which was basically a giant bat creature that was terrifying. And great story. Great story. And Strange's brother was a vampire. So there were issues with that on who would survive from the vampire world. So if they do that ever, that would be bitchin', because that would be a nice horror story line that they could do. Because Marvel has a beautiful history with monsters and supernatural creatures and villains. And some of it was in the 70s, some of it was earlier, like in the 50s with true monster type stories. All of that's great cannon fodder for Doctor Strange. And clearly we're building out magic and mystery in 2 TV shows and a movie series as well. So we'll see what they do with that.
Yeah, so, and I think we're expected to also get zombies in, although I don't know if it's considered canonical, the What If series that's coming up, the animated series. Yeah. I don't know if that's considered canon, but we will be getting Captain America as a zombie. So
yeah, some What Ifs. Did you ever see any of the comics for What If?
I didn't. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they put together.
Some of them are excellent, and some are like, just weird and over the top. A story can get too big and have everything fall sideways. So, a lot there. So with that, any other topics that you want to address from this episode?
I don't have any legal topics, but I think we do have to talk about the post-credit scene, because that was amazing. I mean, not just what it means for the show that, people are, who are pruned don't necessarily die, because I think, although I want to back up and say the amount of times that we as Marvel fans have seen our Loki die is getting a bit ridiculous. I mean, although I should note that Loki himself does point out in the beginning of the episode that Lokis get defeated a lot, but they don't die. The one thing they do is they do not die.
They survive.
They survive. So that was that set up everything to begin with. But I was still, the Mobius pruning, the Loki pruning, just really was definitely emotional. But the fact that you end up in this kind of dumping ground, for lack of a better word, it seems this kind of post-apocalyptic, definitely New York. We see Avengers Tower in the background. That's clearly destroyed. So, and we have all the Lokis, which is, I think I told you right when the episode, on Wednesday, but this was definitely giving me major Into the Spider-Verse vibes with classic Loki, child Loki. I don't know I think there's a caption description for the black guy that has dressed as Loki, but is carrying a version of Mjolnir. And then there's crocodile Loki or alligator Loki. I support it. I also support the theory that he was the one talking and not Richard E. Grant as classic Loki. I support that theory that he was the one talking, which would give more credit to Loki's very shocked face that an alligator was talking to him. That I really, really appreciated.
Yeah, I had the oh my god reaction because Richard E. Grant looks amazing as classic Loki. I mean, just full on straight out of the comic book. They all look like hell. There's overgrowth on the street lights and what's left of the building. So whatever battle happened there, the good guys clearly lost. So it's a destroyed New York. How many other Lokis are there? So there's that. And like, what are we looking at? Are other prune people there? Does everyone who get pruned go to their own hell of other
pruned variants? We clearly know that Mobius survives in some capacity, because if you watch the promo for episode 5, he is in the promo for episode 5 driving a race car, or that looks like a fast car, race car, whatever. And we also know that we have yet to see President Loki, that we've seen in the trailer footage. So is that one of the Lokis that's been pruned and is in this area? I can see a President Loki variant taking over this, kind of hellscape.
Does our Loki run for president of the Lokis? So there's all kinds of fun things that we can see and discuss next week. But this is everything wonderful about comic book stories that can be done on TV. So they just did such a fantastic job with this.
And I think what I am looking forward to as well, because we have from interviews, Loki, the season, the ending of Loki is kind of supposed to significantly change the MCU and kind of the rules of the MCU, as well as Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I think what's interesting to me, and I saw this theory somewhere else, is the idea that, we are seeing variants. Like, we obviously saw Sylvie. We obviously saw the kind of tempad of the other Lokis. But, I mean, did you expect to see the other Loki variants in full form? Like, I don't think we expected that. And I think what that sets up, as a very hopeful person, is Spider-Man No Way Home. We already know that we have J.K. Simmons coming back. We have Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx from the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man universe. I want a Spider-Verse. Like, I want those into the, I don't, obviously, Into the Spider-Verse is its own, gem of a movie that, like, is its own kind of gold. But I think what this is proving is that the idea of multiple versions of a character is possible. It's sellable. Like, people understand it. Like, you don't have to be a comic book fan to understand this. And the idea of this variant, that there's variants across multiple timelines, is a way to sell it, and that they can work together. And I saw, the theory that I saw was that is the reason why they have not, that they're waiting until the Loki finale, or whatever point the Loki show is supposed to change the MCU forever, to release the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, or not Far From Home, No Way Home trailer. Because think about it, this movie's coming out in December. We have not seen a lick of trailer footage. We obviously saw the toy drop the other day. There's been like little tiny hints of stuff, but no any sort of footage. And it's just shocking that the movie's being released, 6 months from now?
Well, there's
nothing.
We have Comic-Con at the end of the month. Loki will be over before that. So like the week before that. So that could be the time to drop a Spider-Man No Way Home trailer. Because if we're going to be dealing with multiverses in multiple movies now, there's a lot of there. So it's also ways for Scarlett Johansson to have more movies, and
I think also what I expect is, this is my little theory, is that the teaming up and kind of bond between two Lokis caused a significant sharp Nexus event. we now see Loki with other variant Lokis, who we would assume there's going to be a team up between at least a couple of them. I think that team up, that significant Nexus event, is what's going to kind of, because if you notice, they seem to have gotten Sylvie's bombs under control, because when we saw the screen post the end of episode 2, all the timelines were kind of completely branched. And then when you saw it, when they were trying to find Loki and Sylvie, the timeline was completely stable until they saw the Nexus event, and that's how they found them. I think this teaming up is going to be almost like an even bigger bond, right? That just completely creates this complete multiverse. And that's what we get. That's going to be the significant event that changes the course of the MCU forever in Loki. And then, of course, that's going to be picked up in Doctor Strange, too. And maybe, because we haven't gotten much information from Spider-Man No Way Home, that could be the bridge, because, right, that comes out right kind of smack dab in the middle of those two movies. So it'll be interesting to see how that bridges between the two.
Yeah, does Spider-Man need Doctor Strange to get home? So
because Doctor Strange is going to be in No Way Home, like that is confirmed. They just released the Funko Pop of him. So good old toy leaks.
Yeah, and again, things that COVID has made difficult to be from, because the toy contracts stand. So again, a lot there. It's an exciting time to be a fan, and there's a lot of fun to be had with this. And I've heard rumors that the end of WandaVision was changed in some way. I haven't gone back to rewatch it to see what that is, if any.
I watched it, and I thank you to all the kind of uber nerds on the internet who took the footage, because there was initial footage that dropped, and somebody was like, oh my God, you can see like Doctor Strange in it. And they were like focusing on different areas. And then there were people who kind of took the time to sit down and kind of break down the changes between the initial cut and now this additional cut. And there were trees added. So it looks like a more wooded setting than what we saw in the end of WandaVision. And there is a light flare across the screen, which some have said is Doctor Strange's astral projection. I tend to side with the folks that are just like, they added this, the more wooded area, simply because that footage is most likely going to be used in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. The film is now in, post-production. So it would make sense that in order to use this clip in the film, they had to, to make it make sense for wherever location they wanted to put it, that they would go in and add some trees. And they erased a duck. I will drop a reference. Why are there no ducks in the duck pond? If somebody gets that, I will totally appreciate that, and they can be my friend forever.
Okay. Journey into mystery. So,
yep. Hint, it's another time travel show. So.
All right. Well, let's see what they do with this and where things go. It can either be brilliant or it could take a crazy train. And I don't know which way it can go yet. So
I think we already had our crazy train with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. that was our crazy train. We all rode on it. And then it was like one of those little trains you ride around the mall. You ride it. You didn't like it. You get off and you forget about it.
We learned a lot from that show. And no need to relitigate it. So, but this is excellent storytelling, and it's a wonderful ride. So with that, at least Steve and I will be here tomorrow to talk about Bad Batch, and maybe Thomas. We'll see. It is 4th of July weekend, and we're trying to put together an anniversary special as well. So stay tuned for more. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to leave a review on wherever you listen to this. And stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky. Thank you all.